June 4, 1942, 0430 hours. Bridge of the carrier Akagi, 240 nautical miles northwest of Midway. Commander Minoru Gender, weakened by pneumonia, stood on the bridge in his pajamas as the Japanese strike force prepared to launch. Through the pre-dawn gloom, for carriers, 11 battleships, and over 200 ships formed the most formidable naval armada Japan had ever assembled. In 6 months of conflict, this fleet had never tasted defeat. The Imperial Japanese Navy's confidence was unwavering. They had sunk or crippled 8 American battleships at Pearl Harbor, overrun the Philippines, humiliated the British at Singapore, and seized an empire stretching across 20 million square miles. Now they intended to destroy the last remnants of American naval strength in the Pacific. What Gender and every Japanese officer believed that morning was that the Americans had no more than 2 operational carriers left in the Pacific, both likely stationed in the South Pacific. The Yorktown, heavily damaged at Coral Sea, was assumed to require months of repair. Their absolute radio silence, they believed, ensured complete security. None imagined that Admiral Chester Nimitz had been deciphering their communications for weeks. American cryptographers had cracked JN-25B, the Japanese naval code. While Gender examined his charts, 233 American aircraft were being armed on 3 carriers that Japan believed were nowhere near the region. Within 14 hours, the Imperial Japanese Navy would suffer its first decisive defeat, lose 4 irreplaceable carriers, and watch 357 of its elite aviators and crew members killed. The myth of Japanese invincibility would go down with the burning carriers, along with Japan's chance to win the Pacific War. The collapse began despite mathematics that seemed to favor Japan. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto commanded a combined fleet with resources far surpassing American capacity, 8 carriers to America's 3, 11 battleships to none, and 248 aircraft to roughly 233. Operation Imai involved 200 vessels operating across millions of square miles of ocean. According to official Japanese operational reports, their assessment of American weakness appeared well-founded. In the 6 months since Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces had achieved successes surpassing their own forecasts: the fall of Singapore with 85,000 British troops, the destruction of the ABDA fleet in the Java Sea, and the conquest of Burma. Each triumph strengthened their belief in Japanese superiority. Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, commanding the 1st Air Fleet, had voiced doubts about the operation's complexity during planning meetings. His Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Ryunosuke Kusaka, cautioned that the plan violated the principle of concentrating force. But those reservations were dismissed. These same officers had expressed concerns before Pearl Harbor. The Japanese Navy operated on several fatal assumptions recorded in post-war interrogations. American carriers were in the South Pacific, Yorktown needed 3 months of repairs, American torpedo bombers were ineffective, American pilots lacked skill, and most crucial of all, that strict radio silence would ensure total surprise. At Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rockefort led a team of cryptanalysts working in stifling basement heat. By May 1942, they were reading portions of 15 to 20% of Japanese naval traffic, enough to identify patterns and intentions. The breakthrough came through meticulous analysis. When Japanese messages repeatedly referenced AF as a target, Rockefort suspected Midway. To verify this, Captain Jasper Holmes proposed a deception. Midway would transmit an uncoded message reporting a failure in its water distillation system. 2 days later, Japanese intelligence reported in JN-25 that the air unit at AF was short of fresh water. Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton later told Congress, "We knew their objectives, their routes, their timetables. We could anticipate which ships would be where and when with remarkable accuracy." The intelligence victory extended beyond identifying the target. American cryptographers discerned the Japanese order of battle, the attack date, June 4th or 5th, and even the approach paths. This allowed Nimitz to position his carriers northeast of Midway, in the one area Japanese search patterns would barely cover. The Yorktown's restoration illustrated American industrial speed. Damaged at Coral Sea, her flight deck pierced by a bomb and her fuel tanks ruptured, Japanese intelligence estimated she would require 3 months in dry dock. Pearl Harbor's repair crews completed the work in 72 hours. According to official Navy records, 1,400 workers labored nonstop from May 27 to 29. Repair teams even stayed aboard as she sailed, continuing work en route to Midway. Such rapid repairs seemed impossible to the Japanese, whose own repairs required weeks. June 4th, 0430 hours, Admiral Nagumo ordered the launch of 108 aircraft, 36 Kate torpedo bombers, 36 Val dive bombers, and 36 Zero fighters against Midway. The launch was flawless, showcasing skill gained from 6 months of victories. Nagumo made a crucial decision, noted in Japanese action reports. He launched only 7 search planes instead of the standard 22. And an 8th plane launched late from the cruiser Tone due to catapult problems. This 30-minute delay would prove disastrous. At 0534, PBY Catalina flying boats from Midway sighted the Japanese fleet. At 0553, Midway radar detected the incoming strike. Every flyable aircraft scrambled, marine fighters, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, even B-17s. The Americans had been expecting them. At 0700, Lieutenant Joy Tamaga, leading the Midway strike, radioed, "There is need for a second attack wave." Midway's defenses had proven stronger than expected, its airfield still operational. Admiral Nagumo faced the critical decision that would determine the battle's outcome. His second wave aircraft were armed with armor-piercing bombs and torpedoes for ship attack. With no enemy fleet detected, at 0715, he ordered them rearmed with fragmentation bombs for ground attack. This decision recorded in surviving Japanese logs initiated chaos on the hangar decks. The Japanese doctrine called for struck ordnance to be returned to magazines, but time constraints led to a fatal shortcut. Bombs and torpedoes were stacked on the hangar decks at 0728. Tone's delayed search plane reported sight what appears to be 10 enemy surface ships bearing 010 degree. Distance 240 miles from Midway. The vague report triggered frantic activity. Were these the carriers they feared? At 0745, Nagumo demanded ship types. The response wouldn't come for 30 critical minutes. Between 0920 and 1020, 3 American torpedo squadrons found the Japanese carriers. The attacks appeared suicidal. Obsolete TBD devastators flying straight and level at 120 knots against 0. Fighters capable of 330 knots. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet attacked. First, of 15 aircraft, 14 were shot down immediately. Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor, watched from the water as his squadron was annihilated. His after-action report described Zeros making multiple passes through the formation, methodically destroying each aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise lost 10 of 14 aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown lost 10 of 12. Not a single torpedo hit a Japanese ship. Japanese after-action reports dismissed the attacks as brave but stupid. What they didn't realize was every Zero fighter down to sea level, leaving no high-altitude protection. At 10:20, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey's dive bombers from Enterprise arrived overhead. McCluskey had searched beyond his calculated intercept point, made a logical deduction to turn north, and followed the wake of a destroyer racing to rejoin the fleet. According to his after-action report, the carrier decks were spotted with aircraft, apparently being rigged for launch. No fighters were visible at altitude. At 10:22, the attack began. Lieutenant Richard Best's 1,000 pounds bomb penetrated a Kagi's flight deck and exploded in the hangar among the stacked ordnance. Within seconds, induced explosions ripped through the ship. Simultaneously, Yorktown's dive bombers struck Soryu. 3 bombs turned her into an inferno. Within 20 seconds, Kaga took 4 direct hits from Enterprise bombers, the first penetrating near the forward elevator and exploding among fueled aircraft. By 128, 3 Japanese carriers were mortally wounded. The mathematics were stunning. Of 41 dive bombers attacking, only 3 were shot down. In 6 minutes, the balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted permanently. The Japanese carriers died slowly, their destruction documented in detail by surviving officers during post-war interrogations. Akagi burned for nearly 12 hours. Captain Taro Aoki remained aboard, attempting salvage until 0200 on June 5 when Yamamoto personally ordered abandonment. At 0450, Japanese destroyers torpedoed her with 4 Type 93s to prevent capture. She sank at 0520. With 267 dead, Kaga's fires proved uncontrollable with ruptured fire mains. Commander Takahisa Amagai ordered abandon ship at 1640. She exploded and sank at 1925 with 811 casualties, the highest of the four carriers. Saria sank at 1913 on June 4 after burning 9 hours. Captain Ryosaku Yanagimoto chose to remain aboard. According to survivor testimonies, he was last seen on the bridge as the ship went down. Casualties numbered 711. Hiryu, the sole survivor of the morning attack, launched 2 strikes that mortally wounded Yorktown. But at 1700, American dive bombers found her and scored 4 hits. She sank at 0900 on June 5. Admiral Tam Yamaguchi and Captain Tomoko Kaku chose to go down with their ship. Losses totaled 416. Yorktown's survival demonstrated American damage control superiority, despite taking 3 bomb hits from Hira's first strike and 2 torpedo hits. From the second, she remained afloat for 2 days. Only when the submarine I-168 torpedoed her on June 6 did she finally sink on June 7. Total American losses 307 dead, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, Hammond, and 150 aircraft. Japanese losses 357 dead, 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, Makuma. Sunk June 6, 248 aircraft, and 110 irreplaceable veteran aircrew. Post-war analysis revealed the completeness of American intelligence superiority. A National Security Agency historical study declassified in 2006 confirmed that Station Hypo provided accurate date of attack within 1 day. Complete routes and deployment patterns. Even the Japanese plan to occupy Midway after its capture. The study concluded no military operation in history began with such complete intelligence about enemy intentions. At 23:55 on June 4, Admiral Yamamoto cancelled Operation MI and ordered withdrawal. He was aboard the super battleship Yamato, 300 m behind the carriers with the most powerful surface fleet ever assembled, yet powerless to affect the outcome. According to the official action report, Yamamoto considered a night surface engagement using his battleships. His staff calculated they could reach the American fleet by 0200, but without air cover and facing American carriers at dawn. The risk was deemed unacceptable. The retreat marked the first time in the war that a Japanese operation had been cancelled due to enemy action. Midway's impact exceeded the immediate losses. Japan's strategic initiative in the Pacific ended on June 4, 1942. Every subsequent operation would be defensive or reactive. The pilot losses proved irreplaceable. The 110 air crew lost averaged over 800 flight hours each. Many veterans since the China incident of 1937. Japan's pre-war aviation training program produced only about 100 pilots per year, while the U.S. Navy was already preparing roughly 2,500 trainees monthly. Japanese naval doctrine, rooted in the decisive battle concept inherited from their 1905 triumph at Tsushima, had become outdated. The Americans demonstrated that modern naval combat had evolved into a struggle of industrial output and intelligence rather than pure warrior ethos. Verified production figures exposed the futility of Japan's position after Midway. Carrier construction. Japan completed 12 carriers from Midway to war's end. The United States produced 141 17 fleet carriers and 124 escort carriers. Aircraft production, 1942 to 1945, 65,000. United States, 297000. Pilot training by 1944 showed a stark divide. Japanese aviators entered combat with only 150 to 200 flight hours, while American pilots averaged over 600 hours. Industrial strength. U.S. national income was 17 times greater than Japan's pre-war economy. America supplied two-thirds of all Allied military equipment. Japanese post-war technical evaluations identified systemic weaknesses, carrier design deficiencies, enclosed hangar decks that trapped blast pressure, inadequate fire suppression systems, weak damage control routines, and insufficient ventilation. Aircraft vulnerabilities were equally severe. Zero fighters lacked armor plating and self-sealing fuel tanks, achieving high performance by sacrificing survivability. No reliable pilot recovery system existed. Operational shortcomings included inadequate search patterns, 7 planes instead of the doctrinal 22, poor radio discipline even while maintaining silence, inflexible tactical doctrine. American damage control, exemplified by the Yorktown's ability to survive repeated strikes, reflected superior training. All sailors trained in firefighting, CO2 systems, foam generators, portable pumps, and ship design featuring redundant systems and stronger compartmentalization. Doctrine emphasized preservation of ships and crews, rather than death before dishonor. Japanese carriers remain lethally vulnerable to single hits due to sympathetic explosions from their own ordnance, a flaw recognized but not corrected after Midway. The role of intelligence in the victory was decisive. Admiral Nimitz noted in his post-war analysis that without early insight into Japanese intentions, movements, and timing, Midway would have ended quite differently. Station Hypo's triumph went far beyond simple code-breaking. It produced actionable intelligence enabling precise placement of American carriers, strengthening Midway's defenses, conserving forces by avoiding Japanese feints, and achieving tactical surprise despite inferior numbers. Post-war interrogations also revealed command issues, insufficient reconnaissance recorded in action logs, hesitation over rearming attested by multiple witnesses, failure to launch available aircraft under attack, and weak coordination with supporting units. Strategic flaws included an overly elaborate plan requiring flawless timing, dispersal of forces, simultaneous solution operations, and underestimation of American capability, all compounded by ignoring signals intelligence pointing to increased U.S. radio activity. The loss of elite pilots at Midway triggered a cascading decline documented in Japanese training archives. Pre-Midway, 500 to 700 hours over 2 years. Post-Midway emergency programs, 150 to 200 hours in 4 months. By 1944, some pilots deployed with under 100 hours. American pilot proficiency steadily expanded. 1942, 400 hours. 1943, 500 hours. 1944, 600 plus hours. The disparity became insurmountable. At the 1944 Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japanese aviators averaged around 200 hours, while Americans exceeded 600. Outcome: 346 Japanese aircraft lost versus 30 American, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Midway forced Japanese strategists to confront American industrial dominance. Captured Japanese documents show their planners calculated that to match U.S. carrier construction, Japan would need 300% of its total steel output, to match aircraft production, 400% of its aluminum capacity, and to match American pilot training, fuel supplies Japan simply did not possess. The arithmetic of defeat was unavoidable. Midway's effects resonated through every later Pacific campaign. Guadalcanal, August 1942, Japan committed forces piecemeal, unable to concentrate lost carrier power. Santa Cruz, October 1942, Japan won tactically but lost 99 aircrew to America's 26, attrition they could not sustain. Philippine Sea, June 1944, Japan's rebuilt carrier arm was annihilated, losing 476 aircraft and 450 crew. Midway also revealed widening technological gaps: American shipboard radar versus Japanese reliance on lookouts, American TBS ship-to-ship radio versus Japanese signal flags and lamps, U.S. cryptanalysis of JN-25 versus Japan's inability to break American naval ciphers, and American ability to update designs rapidly while Japan struggled to retool factories. Post-war testimonies deepen the picture. Captain Taijiro Aoki, Akagi's skipper, stated that secondary explosions from poorly stored ordnance doomed his vessel. Commander Yasuji Watanabe, Yamamoto's operations officer, confirmed that Yamamoto grasped immediately that the war was irretrievable after Midway, though this was never acknowledged publicly. Ensign George Gay's eyewitness report as Torpedo 8's lone survivor provided invaluable detail on Japanese carrier operations during the attack. Modern historians, notably Jonathan Parshall and Anthony Tully in Shattered Sword, 2005, corrected long-held misconceptions. Japanese carriers were 5 minutes from launching. Reality, operational records show 30 to 40 minutes were still required. Nagumo should have sent a partial strike. Reality, Japanese doctrine demanded coordinated attacks. Partial launches were not practiced. Poor reconnaissance was bad luck. Insufficient search coverage was doctrinal, not accidental. Midway's legacy extends beyond the war. Strategic lessons. Intelligence superiority can outweigh numerical inferiority. Industrial power determines long conflicts. Technological adaptation surpasses initial advantage. Logistics and production outweigh tactical virtuosity. Doctrinal shifts followed. Never again would carriers mass so tightly. Radar and electronic warfare became central. Damage control was elevated to equal importance with offensive strength, and pilot preservation replaced fatalistic notions of honorable sacrifice. Admiral Nimitz's official report concluded, "The Battle of Midway was essentially a victory of intelligence. We knew Japanese intentions, strength, and schedule. They knew nothing of ours." Japanese historian Mitsuru Yoshida wrote that after Midway, Japan shifted permanently to the defensive. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, analyzing wartime Japanese documents, concluded that the Imperial Navy never recovered from Midway. Every subsequent operation was constrained by the losses of June 4 to 5, 1942. Statistical overview. Japan 4 fleet carriers, 2 light carriers, 11 battleships, 16 cruisers, 46 destroyers, 248 carrier aircraft. United States 3 fleet carriers, 0 battleships, 8 cruisers, 15 destroyers, 233 carrier aircraft, 127 land-based aircraft. Losses. Japan 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 248 aircraft, 357 dead including 110 aircrew. United States 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, 307 dead. Timeframe, Japanese carrier dominance 0430 to 0928, 5 hours. American decisive strike 1022 to 1028, 6 minutes. Battle duration, roughly 28 hours, June 4, 0430 to June 5, 0900. Midway stands as enduring evidence that intelligence and preparation can defeat surprise and superior numbers. Industrial capacity outweighs warrior tradition, technological adaptation overcomes early advantages, and arrogance remains warfare's most lethal adversary. The force Japan sent to Midway was the most powerful carrier arm ever assembled at that point. By dusk its backbone was destroyed. The Americans prevailed not through fortune but through foresight, planning, and industrial strength. In 6 minutes of coordinated dive bomber attacks, the strategic fate of the Pacific War was sealed. Japan would continue fighting for 3 more years, but the possibility of victory died with 4 carriers northwest of Midway on June 4, 1942. Midway proved that modern naval conflict had become a struggle of intelligence, technology, and industrial power. Japan brought superior experience and tactics, America brought superior information and the ability to replace losses. In that collision, the future overcame the past. Midway remains the U.S. Navy's greatest victory, not solely for the tactical triumph but for proving that democracy's industrial might and technological ingenuity could overwhelm militaristic expertise. The Japanese expected an easy triumph, instead, they encountered the beginning of their empire's collapse.